What's going on, Collective listeners? How are we doing today? Hopefully you guys are doing pretty well. Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Grasso. Today, we are joined by Scott Caulfield, a man who needs no introduction, but he is the Director of Strength and Conditioning for Norwich University Athletics. They're the Norwich Cadets up in Vermont. He has moved back home now. And so, honestly, special guest. It was a huge pleasure to have him on, and it was a great conversation. I really think you're going to enjoy, especially if you're somebody who's concerned with the current state of the industry and some of the pros and some of the cons. And obviously you have questions and concerns about, what's been happening in the industry and where it's going. This is a podcast for you. So enjoy it. And have a great day. Scott, what's going on? Appreciate it. This is let's try this again, round two. Yeah, this is like the perks of like working from home now. It's like, someone might be like dusting or moving around near the Wi-Fi signal, unhook the cable, and then all of a sudden you're gone. You got nothing. But yeah. So welcome. Appreciate you hopping on for sure. But yeah, would love to let you kind of introduce yourself and just let the people know a little bit about your story. I've never truly fully heard your story from start to finish either. So I think it would be, well, not to finish. Obviously, it's not done. There's much more to come. But just to where you're at now at least. But welcome.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the opportunity, and certainly heard of the podcast before and had people that I know on it. So great to have the chance. I'm up at Scott Caulfield, Director of Strength and Conditioning at Norwich University in Northfield, Vermont, which is a key indicator because there is a Norwich, Vermont, and that's down by Dartmouth College, which I was very familiar with my time there. But anyway, I grew up here in central Vermont, actually, a couple towns over from literally where I sit now on a daily basis, which is kind of cool. So I went to basketball camp at the college all throughout middle school and high school. I actually learned how to ski here when I was in third grade. They had a ski hill across the street. So super cool. A lot of the coaches who are here now, I grew up with, like either playing men's league hoop or our women's hockey coach actually trained her when she was in high school. So I've known her for her entire athletic career, basically. Division III, we've got 22 varsity sports, over 600 athletes. We're the nation's oldest private military college, birthplace of ROTC. So we have a strong core of cadets and military influence. So for me, again, being a veteran, it's just an awesome place to be. I love the Division III atmosphere with the emphasis on really being well-rounded in a lot of different areas of your life. So, obviously sports is big, but we want them to have other pursuits and interests aside and have time to do those things outside of sports too. So no better place than being in the Green Mountains of Vermont to have a lot of other stuff to take you out of the gym. But it's been cool. I only have one full-time assistant, but that being said, I'm the first person in this role, for 20 years that they've had some sort of position here, to have a full-time assistant. So the administration's taking it more seriously in what we do here. And we've had a great, August last year was the starting point. So just over a year now into it, we've got pretty much every single team fully bought in, full tilt, like nice. Team training. It's awesome. Yeah, it's a game changer from, kind of how we started. I was also the fourth person in 4 years to have this position. So the turnover, the pandemic, all those things just were kind of a perfect storm. But I also say it was a perfect storm for me walking into it with my experience and education and just the way that I do things. It was kind of a perfect storm to have it set up for me to have success and just the way that I've handled things, and having a assistant who's also an alumni. She played on our 2018 women's national championship team. So she, taught her street cred and, coaching ability also go a long way to helping out our female athletes as well. First female strength coach we've ever had. So, it's been cool. Like I said, the good thing is we're talking about building new facilities. People that follow us on social media probably have seen what we call them, the shred sheds, the two training lockers from Beaver Fit and Play that we added this late summer. We got those in right around football camp starting. Obviously, it's not Florida or South Carolina. It'd be nice if we had the climate there to be able to train year round. But that being said, it's unseasonably warm right here this year. They're getting used into November now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then just, seasons are changing and everybody's starting to get inside. I tell people we have everything we need to do the job, just not everything we want, right? So we have a very small weight room. And that being said, like we can get the job done. It's just not the scale that we need to be able to do it. So we'll get there eventually.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Like, yeah, I have what I need to get it done. Like, I can get it
Yeah,
done. I always tell people, it's like, yeah, if you give me just like a room, like we'll get something done. You know what I mean? Just give you some space and
absolutely.
we'll make some things happen. But obviously, like, improving those resources and just having more at your disposal will only make the quality experience that you can provide for the athletes even that much better. But yeah, I agree. It is unseasonably warm right now. So that's why I'm kind of wondering. I'm like, when's snowboard and ski season going to start? Because I'm like, I know it's like, so you grew up, what are some of the mountains that you used to grow up skiing at? I would assume like the
Some
major
of the
basic ones.
smaller, yeah, some of the smaller ones are more the hometown ones. There's a place called Burke Mountain, which is where Burke Ski and Snowboard Club is.
Oh,
Ski school that put out a lot of big name Olympians, came up through Vermont. That was another place that we went when I was in high school to ski. But like Stowe is our closest mountain to me now, and Sugar Bush. So those are pretty big
nice.
names. Killington's only 90 minutes away. It's actually kind of funny because now that I moved from Colorado to Vermont, I'm actually closer, to a lot of the mountains, to which I say, living in a place like Northfield where we live here it's more like being in a ski town in like a Colorado sense. So in Colorado
Yeah,
Springs, you're still 2 hours from the mountains, but here we're in the mountains right now.
that's
So
wild.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
pretty
would have
neat.
never
For
guessed
me, it's
that.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, like being in Colorado, I'm thinking, oh, he's got to have access to like all this stuff. But yeah. I've heard for some people who actually moved out to Colorado, same thing, where they're like, yeah, I kind of like living in the Northeast a little bit more. I feel like I actually have more access to some of the mountains that I want to get to. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and it's great. Like I said, that the mountain that we have literally across the street from our campus, it's called Paine Mountain, Paine,
Mm.
not strength coach
Yeah.
Paine. And
I was gonna say it doesn't
but
really seem like an appealing mountain for someone who's a
yeah,
beginner like myself. Yeah.
yeah. But they got rid of we got rid of the ski lift in 1993. But that being said, it's all cut out with trails, and like, so we take our touring skis there, and anytime it's snowy enough, and we'll go up it and then ski down it. Like,
Oh, nice.
that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the winter daily routine. Get your mind right. Morning
Yeah.
cardio.
Oh, really? Yeah. So there actually have no lifts. You literally trek
Nope.
up
Yeah,
there.
the lifts are gone. Yeah. So
Wow.
yep, it's all human powered now, which also means there's not a lot of people doing it because it's
Yeah, that makes
not
sense.
easy.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when I first started snowboarding, my brother's been doing it for like over a decade, and he tried to get me into it. And so like this past winter, I went with him a bunch of times. We hit, like the typical like Stratton, Killington. We went to Loon in New Hampshire. Went to Jay Peak actually, up all
Oh
the way
yeah.
up.
Yep.
Yeah. It
Yep.
was
Way
pretty.
up north.
We went to Jay Peak on May 13th or May 11th or something like that. It was like their
Yep.
final day. They
Wow.
were like, hey, listen,
Yeah.
we got like one trail. We drove 5.5
Yeah.
hours for
Yeah.
one trail,
Oh
but
man.
it was a good story though. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I remember
Nice.
we'd be on the lift and I'd see these guys like trekking up the mountain in their
Yeah.
skis. Kind of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I'm like, Mike, like what is that or whatever? He's like, yeah, like they'll literally like trek all the way up the mountain, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And then they'll just ski down. And I'm like, that's a different type of workout, obviously. Yeah, but it's something I'm
Yeah.
assuming you're super accustomed to, not too challenging for you at this point.
Yeah. No, it's my keep my mind right. Good winter training. Get outside in the morning, coach all afternoon and evening. So that's
Yeah,
kind of the way we have it set up. So it works
yeah.
well.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, Vermont is fantastic. We were actually just up in Jericho, Vermont, I believe it is. Is for it
Okay.
was a charity wiffle ball tournament that we do up there every
Oh
year in
yeah.
like in
Nice.
October. It's like they
Yeah.
take like Fenway Park and Wrigley Field and Field of
Yeah.
Dreams and
Yeah.
make like small
Yeah.
mini wiffle ball replicas. It's fantastic. The Craig Breslow, he's owner of the founder of the Strike 3 Foundation. He used to play for the Sox. But yeah, he's the founder or whatever. So it's
Oh
really
yeah.
cool. Vermont's a special place. I mean, it's just
It is.
I do
It's
feel like
cool.
there is something about like the air quality up there. When you get up in the mountains, there's something just sort of like it's so quiet almost, and it just
Yeah.
feels like everything kind of like settles a little bit. It really is like a get your mind right place for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got its, rural, living in the rural areas has the pluses and minuses, right? So, there's not as many options for groceries or restaurants and stuff like that. There's no such thing as Grubhub here, right? Like,
Right.
so like there's certain aspects where you're like, we
Yeah.
can't really do that. But I also love that too. Like I live super close to campus. I really haven't driven my car that much in the past year. Like
Nice.
I was probably the only person that didn't complain about gas prices in the last
Yeah.
2 years. Like
Right. Yeah.
it meant nothing to me. I'm like, I don't really drive, so it's not a
Yeah.
factor.
Exactly. Yeah. You and me both. That's how, like, I got no business complaining because I don't leave my house. So it's, it's working from home. There's nothing I should be complaining about. But yeah, no, that's awesome. And so, the other thing you mentioned, I didn't know that you served. You said you served as well.
Yeah, I was a terrible college student first off. So I went to college for 2 years, and then my grade my grades and my interest in school at that point told me I probably should try something else. So I joined the Navy after my sophomore year, and I was on an amphibious assault ship for 4 years out of Norfolk, Virginia.
Nice.
Just like on Top Gun, if you see the guys shooting helicopters and jets off the flight deck, that's what we did. That was my job. So pretty
All
cool.
right.
I joke
Yeah.
around. That first Top Gun movie is how they got most of us to enlist around that time, the early
Yeah.
90s. It was,
Good selling point.
yeah. So I'm sure the second one did just as good of a job of it. So
Yeah. I haven't seen the second one yet, but I have heard it's fantastic. I've actually heard people say it's better than the first one. I don't know if that's true or not,
yeah,
but
I've heard that. I don't know. I have a nostalgic kind of, you know, connection to the first one. So, but
yeah.
it's definitely up there. Most sequels don't do the justice that this one did.
I
Yeah.
know that's what I was so surprised about. I'm like, wow, like usually I've never heard people say. I mean, usually people are like, hey, leave well enough alone. Like if they did a
Yep.
bang up job on the first set, the first movie, you just let it
Yeah.
happen. You know what I mean? But yeah, like they try to redo the Sandlot. They try to make it like
Right.
whatever, it's like just
Yeah.
leave it alone. But well, thank you for your service. I do appreciate
I
that for sure.
appreciate it. No, thank you.
That is awesome though. It's a good story. It's always interesting. I do feel like there is a little bit of that, consistency whenever you talk to people like, yeah, listen, because I just started training jujitsu actually, and my instructor was in, combatives in the Army for about 23 years. And he kind of had a similar story. He was like, yeah, listen, I didn't really know where I was or what I wanted to do when I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't going to college. Like couldn't really, hack it in school or whatever. He's like, I liked wrestling and, and he liked everything else that came with being in the Army, obviously, but needed it, he needed it to kind of like guide the path. But so yeah, what was that like for you? Like as you transitioned out of it, like where did you go from there? And like, how did that kind of like shape moving into strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I mean, the goal was to like get out of the Navy and go back to school. That was kind of the underlying goal. So I knew the GI Bill was this thing that you could get. So that was kind of why I joined. It was like, all right, get that GI Bill and you can go back to school and, and finish. So then after that, I got out and I worked for about a year, give or take, played men's league hoops and worked part-time at a gym. And that was kind of what started. So I was working part-time at a gym and part-time at another job. And then the general manager at the gym was like, hey, like you clearly like are interested in this stuff. You should really think about doing it. And so that when I went back to school, I went for physical education, but I didn't want to do an extra year of school. So I didn't do student teaching. So mine was much more related to like fitness center management, nutrition, all the good like pedagogy stuff that I think is important was great in the PE curriculum, motor learning, skill development, like all that kind of stuff. But it was much more like thinking, all right, how do I do this in fitness? And I didn't know how that was going to happen. So I got out of school and still was just kind of working part-time jobs until that same guy at the gym basically came and said, hey, look, you're clearly passionate. You got a degree in this. Like, why don't you just come work here full time? And then let's see where it goes. And that's kind of how it happens. It's like, it snowballed. I got a personal training certificate. I started personal training, started managing the personal trainers, became the fitness director, just took over both clubs, and I was over kind of the fitness director for both facilities. We had one about 8 miles apart from the other. And then at some point, like, I don't exactly remember how or where, but like basically, training athletes or working with younger athletes came up, and someone told me about the NSCA and the CLCS certification. And so I started looking into that, and then because again, you got to think this is rural Vermont in like the early 2000s. So there's also, and I also joke around that in Vermont and really in New England in general, we're a few years behind most of the rest of the country, right? So like I just joke around that like we didn't find out about stuff. So it's harder to find out about that stuff. But long story short, I figured out that training athletes was a thing. I just got more and more into going. I went to a couple NSCA events, and people were just super welcoming and kind of, willing to show me the ropes and talk to me about training and mentor me a little bit. And it was awesome. And so I hit it off with a lot of people that are still good friends today.
That's awesome.
And that I have connected with. And so that was kind of what spun that out. But that, long story short, is I ended up making connections. I started my own strength and conditioning camp at this private gym so that I could get my own clients trained, so I could train athletes. Basically, that was the only reason I did it. I've had, since that time when I was at NSCA, one of the kids that actually went to my camp back in the day ended up being an intern at one point.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal to think about some of that stuff, but it's been really cool. And now a bunch of the, then that opportunity, kind of starting that stuff, getting involved with NSCA. I got involved at the state level first with the clinics, and that was a really good opportunity to get speaking experience, but also just kind of more organized, more embedded into the organization. And then again, when the guy Paul Goodman was the Vermont state director, and he was at UVM, University of Vermont, where he left in 2007 to take over as the Chicago Blackhawks strength coach, where he still is, had a pretty decent run, I guess.
Yeah.
And so he basically, had handed that off to me, and then I was able to take it over and just continue doing continuing education events on a smaller scale at the state level. And, and it was a little bit self-satisfying because now I was able to reach out to the coaches that I wanted to talk to, like we were kind of talking about podcasts, talk to who do I want to have a speaker. So I connected with Leanne Blinn, who's a big mentor of mine at ASU now, and a guy named Jason Lacaslo, who was at Boston College, and he was with the Bears more recently. My first clinic, it was awesome. It was like a mini version of a coaches conference. It was just all D1 through 3 strength coaches, and it was awesome. I still remember that lineup. A lot of those people I still stay in contact with. And so that again kind of snowballed into being more involved. And, I applied for a job at the NSCA in 2010, and I was lucky enough to get it and went out there in January 2011. In a totally different role. I was in an education coordinator role, coaching only a couple hours in the weight room. And I was like, what did I just do? I can't believe I left the job and went all the way across the country to do this. And luckily again, I always say, preparation is where skill meets, or luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right? So, I had the right experience, et cetera, et cetera. And 6 months after I'd been there, I got promoted to the performance center manager position. And then my job at NSCA evolved a lot in the 10 years I was there. It changed greatly from only being in the gym to doing everything else outside of the facility. And, it's ebbed and flowed, and obviously got to host the NSCA coaching podcast for those first 3 seasons and do a lot of cool stuff related to coaching education and being kind of the liaison or the kind of spokesperson for strength and conditioning coaches for the majority of my time there, which was awesome. And just, again, the people I met and connected with are some of my best friends and mentors now, and people I mentor, and just, the connections I made through that organization are unparalleled.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I was kind of my next question is just your experience obviously there. So you were there from 2011 to, what was your final year there?
So I went to Colorado College in the fall of 19. So I didn't leave Colorado until 21. So I was really NSCA almost 10 years. It was like 9 years and 9 months. And then I was at Colorado College for about 2 years, just under 2 years.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't realize it was 9 years. Yeah. That's awesome. That's and obviously like a major impact. And that's how I think, I don't know if that's how a lot of people came across some of your work, but that was definitely how I came across some of it. Right. And it's just kind of this is Scott. And I think it was actually my brother who was friends with a bunch of people from Dartmouth who has nothing to do with strength and conditioning. He works in he's a startup entrepreneur for a medical company. Right. And he was just like, hey, you should get in contact with Scott Caulfield. And I was like, yeah, I was like, that name sounds so familiar. And I was like, why would you know who he is though? And he was like, oh yeah, I heard about through the NSCA, and I got some friends at Dartmouth, blah, blah, blah. So okay.
Nice.
But yeah, so if you don't mind, I mean, I was wondering, right? I'm like, well, you're probably the only person that I actually know who's worked at the NSCA and like been inside the walls there, right? At least for like a lengthy period of time, right? And so I'm kind of wondering, like, I hear all the time, especially when I was like really young in the industry, like everyone talks about like, okay, and like as you're coming up, we've got these two governing bodies, right? Like you've got, and then we've got these tests, and we've got like the CSCS, and we got other stuff and whatever it is, and like this is why we have so much issue and like strength and conditioning and all this. And I'm usually somebody who's kind of like, I'm always kind of like somewhere in the middle. I'm like, yeah, it's probably neither one or the other, right? It's probably always somewhere, in that median spot. So I do wonder what your take is on someone who actually worked for the NSCA. Like, what is your take on like, the governing bodies and the way that strength and conditioning is currently run? Like, I'm sure you've got a ton of experience. You've probably had a ton of people give you that type of conversation, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, for one, I think most people, they don't attach like, and that was why I think my position and how things have evolved was so critical. They don't really attach a name or a face to the organization, right? It's kind of this big overarching governing body, and we use that term a lot for our profession, but like a lot of the time they didn't know the people they were connected with. They felt like, I'm just paying this random money for whatever reason, right? Or they're charging me money again. And I think they get the journals, right? So like people thought that like there's just people, this is like me, this is my assumption of what most people think. There's just people in lab coats out at the NSCA headquarters walking around like writing the journals and typing them up, and they're like doing research on stuff, which is the farthest thing from the truth. There's nothing to do with the journals that happen within the NSCA headquarters. It's a total separate branch. I mean, there is a person who's in charge of the, kind of being the liaison between the journal company and then the journal editors and whatnot. So obviously there's that bridge, but like there's rare when an actual someone that works at NSCA is authoring a journal article. But it's just the day to day. So there is a facility that was built in 2003. What they mainly thought of for building that facility was it was going to be used for like the clinics, like the 2-day and 1-day events that they do, and bringing coaches in and having like groups of kind of basically like a lot of the specialty clinics that we did when I was there: combat sports, hockey, endurance training, periodization. There's a lot of really cool kind of events like that it was built for. But what they realized quickly is that the other 23 hours or 5 days a week that wasn't getting used for a clinic, it was just sitting empty. So, because of the location of where it is in the Springs, it's right next to the World Arena ice hall, and that's what a figure skating Olympic hub for figure skating. So a lot of the original athletes that they started out training back in the day were figure skaters and youth hockey players. And because Colorado College played their games in the World Arena right next door, that's how we established a relationship with Colorado College hockey. So they trained there really from the time that was begun, and whoever had my position was kind of in charge of CC hockey. So that was like the main team from 2011 to 2015 that I trained there through the NSCA relationship, along with other youth hockey teams and just all kinds of different things that would come up. 10th Group Special Forces, before they hired a lot of their own strength coaches and before the H2F was a thing, they started training at NSCA. Colorado Springs SWAT team. So it was a really cool, diverse group of athletes that we got to work with there. And then that being said, like I said, the other thing that happened is Boyd Epley, who founded the organization, John Jost was on the board of directors at the time. They felt that, again, they had seen, the other organization pop up, and who both of them had helped the other organization, Collegiate Strength Coaches. And they felt the NSCA wasn't, at certain times doing its due diligence for our coaches. And so they were really like, you got to be the guy. Like, you got to get out in front and meet all the coaches, and they got to know who you are and connect with you. And I was like, I don't know about that. Like, I like being in the weight room. I think I'm good at this. Like, I don't need to go out and do that. And long story short, it changed the role that I had, but it was probably the best thing that could have happened. And it gave me a chance to like help connect people and just show that there was, they actually do train athletes over there. And like, not a bunch of people walking around with lab coats. And I mean, that being said too, right, there's a lot of different, populations or professions that make up the NSCA. It's not just the collegiate strength coaches. So, being that it is an organization that represents researchers, strength and conditioning coaches, personal trainers, private sector, every A to Z, like, yes, there is a lot of other things that go on and there's a lot of competing demands. So, I think that's why it's important to have roles like I had there as a strength and conditioning coach, why they have someone specific to tactical, why they've kind of broken out those what they call audience groups now, to be more specified to really work on that stuff. And again, it's not, the other thing to keep in mind is we're not at the level that athletic training is at and got to, right, with licensure, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. Like, I don't know where that's a totally separate podcast episode, right? Like,
right,
where that takes us. But that being said, it's not the organizations, collegiate strength coaches too, they're not set up as lobbying organizations, right? So when people say, how can they post that job for $10,000? And why aren't the NSCA and CSCA doing anything about it? Well, that's not really how it works. They're set up as educational organizations that provide certification and continuing education, right? And maybe someday they'll have a lobbying arm or an area of that they're able to do more, and certainly want them to do enough outreach and promotion of our professions to feel supported. But I also think you have to realize at the end of the day, like, they're certainly not set up to do certain things like go into the state by state organization of what licensure looks like at this point.
Right. Yeah, I think that's and that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something, and I would say, like, for our listeners, obviously, if we can kind of get into maybe explaining what you mean by not being a lobbying party, and even for myself, right? Because I'm somebody who, like, I'm just like whatever, I'm like just like any other strength coach, right? I open up Twitter, I open up Instagram, I see everybody freaking out about something, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, something important must be happening, right? And then the more rational side of you thinks, like, again, I'm like, okay, usually when people are like really freaking out about something, it's like, it probably is like something that matters, but it's probably not as like bad as you're making it seem. And you're like, where is it? It's like, it's tough to filter like any information. And that's definitely its own separate podcast, is trying to like filter through like what's real and what isn't real on social media. I actually lay up. I literally sit up at night. I think this is what I thought about last night for like 2 hours, about how I feel like nothing I do in my life is like everything is almost like tampered with and tainted in some way, shape, or form. Like all the outside of like lifting, like going to the beach and like working on my truck, I feel like, and jiu-jitsu, I feel like everything has just like been like tampered with in some way. So there's like a lack of purity. But again, that's its own separate psychological aspect. But yeah, if, kind of like explain a little bit of like, I guess my question would be like, I used to say this to people and I didn't really know what I was saying, but I'd be like, yeah, like, listen, I get it. Like, we want to have this like licensure, like athletic trainers, and we want to be protected and stuff like that. But at the same time, with like with a lot of things, I always say, like, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And I'm wondering, and like in my mind, I wasn't sure what that meant. I'm like, I just feel like there would probably be a lot of things that changed, and there would be some things that changed for the good, but I would imagine there would probably be some things that we have, some benefits we have now that wouldn't be, we wouldn't have anymore as strength coaches. And I'm wondering, like, what does it mean for them to maybe change their stance on just being someone that provides education versus being, something that's like more of a lobbying party, where, what would the power structure kind of be? What would they be able to do versus not being able to do? And kind of like, what would that mean for strength coaches, right? For those of the strength coaches who are like, hey, we need to have more licensure, we need to be athletic trainers, whatever it is, like, what would that look like in your mind?
Yeah. Well, and I will say this too, that even I know that the current board of directors, and there has been some things in the press and in the news that have stimulated enough members to go to the people, to the organization and say, hey, this is important to us. And what I'm seeing, as I'm still super involved. I joke around with Eric McMahon all the time that they should still probably be giving me a paycheck for everything that I do on a regular basis, because I'm on the college coaches executive council for the SIG. I'm the chairman of the nomination committee, which is actually probably the coolest committee I've ever been on, and I've gotten to learn way more stuff about the inside workings of the NSCA that I didn't necessarily know about when I was at the organization actually working there, which has been cool. And so I know that kind of advocacy is a big key area for the current board, and how they can kind of basically represent strength coaches better. So I think where it gets tricky is like, if, at the end of the day, if we went from where we are now to licensure, like licensure is going to require a standardized kind of way of training, standardized, obviously testing, the whole 9 yards across each state by state. And so to me, that means there potentially could be less flexibility in what you do as a professional, methodology wise, even that becomes across, like, because we hope it's the NSCA or CSCCA or us two combined that are able to influence it. But I don't know how that works. Like maybe some other organization that has more money than both of them, right, comes in and is able to get the stronghold, and then that becomes that, so again, I think for us, it's, for me, feeling supported, it's like knowing that is a key area that the organization has said they're looking to work on, to be more involved in advocacy, so that I think we can get some more of this like salary data published, and like just again, we have to get it into the hands. Because here's the other thing I learned while working there. The NCAA, if you're going to rely on them to make a lot of like hardline black and white decisions, is very unlikely. Like you're going to be frustrated, right? And that's what a lot of us have become frustrated, because we see or hear about someone who's not certified, they gets this job or something happens and you find out that, or right, so usually the way it happens is someone gets rhabdo and then they find out that someone didn't have a certification. But that, long story short, like it's institutions that are hiring these people regardless. And the NCAA hasn't said, no, you only are required to have this or that. They're very ambiguous. It's like, well, this is recommended, that's recommended, that's recommended. And you should choose something that's from the recommended list. But at the end of the day, we believe in institutional autonomy. So you can really do whatever you want as long as you have enough money, like, right, or not enough. And which is the cases of the D2 and 3 schools that have no money and have not put any money into their facilities or budget, and then they have to basically come up with that. But that being said, I mean, I'm at a place, that basically, more than doubled their salaries, because our positions basically didn't exist until we got here. And obviously that was a commitment that they realized. We had too much turnover, we had too many injuries, we had too many lack of engagement in our weight room from the varsity athletes. And we had to make this investment in the people to get this whole thing to get turned around.
Yeah. So, yeah. No, that's great insight. I and that's kind of what I was like hoping for, right? Like that's kind of where, in my mind, like I said, like I wasn't sure what I was saying, but in my mind, I'm thinking like, yeah, it can't be that simple. Like nothing's ever like that simple. You know what I mean? So where it's like, oh, we need to just go from A to B, and then everything will be clear. And I'm just as guilty as any other strength coach of feeling that and thinking that, right? Like especially as like a young strength coach coming up in my mind, I'm like, okay, so like these are where I think we're all pretty good at identifying the problems, right? But then it's like, well, being creative enough to come up with solutions is a completely different ball game. And then some of the solutions we come up with, although they may be great ideas, how feasible and like what are the repercussions of some of those solutions that we provide, you know what I mean? But I do think it's interesting though, like to have something like that. And I don't, do you ever see it get to a point where it's like, okay, we will have a governing body, and then the limitations around like how rigid some of those protocols may need to be, maybe there's a governing body that comes in, and then you have people working towards creating more flexibility within that governing body, where it's like, hey, here's what we're looking for, but also there's flexibility within that. And so now we can have, right, like, I'm working towards that like pie in the sky, and I know that that's not usually how it works, but I do wonder if, I would assume somebody listening is probably wondering that, right? So I'm asking for that in myself.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the other thing I'll say too is you got to keep in mind, take this advantage to use a Navy analogy, right? Like being at a place like the NSCA, like making a impactful decision or change is like turning an aircraft carrier, right? So it's not this like, oh, you take this right. Well, yeah, we know that we're going to change these things and we're going to plot this course, but it's going to take us a while to turn that aircraft carrier to get it to make that turn. So like, I think it's important to know it, right? When you're like, oh, this is important. Okay. But think of any organization, people have A to Z on their job description and A to Z project they're working on. Okay, well, yes, this is important. So does this person start on it tomorrow? Because what about the other 5 things they're working on, right? And again, think national, like I want people think big picture. NSCA 50,000 members, however many thousand people certified in all these different areas. Different people work in different areas. So like, I would not be answering personal training questions, right? Like I wouldn't be jumping off of a project that I worked on to get involved in personal training. So I think the cool thing is that being said, the accreditation stuff that's being worked on, that we've seen a lot of info come out about, and by 2030, right, there's going to have to be a degree in the field requirement, and we've seen that. I believe the collegiate strength coaches require that as well, and so that's going to help us get kind of that road. I think the other thing I know, the NSCA had some advisors who helped the NATA kind of get there when they made these same kind of moves into professionalism and credentialing, however you want to licensure, whatever you want to call it. So I know that they have some key advisors that are helping along the process. But again, from what I've heard, I just know how it's a long process. It's kind of why they made the accreditation window so long, because they want to get all those aspects. But obviously after that, at some point, I think the next step becomes licensure, whatever that looks like. Again, that's way above my kind of area of expertise, and I don't know that I want to know much more about it, but yeah. But I mean, that being said, I definitely would like to, I hope to be on the board of directors someday, right? That's kind of my end goal, would be being the president of the board of directors and be able to have like a real kind of voice and influence over the day-to-day stuff. I think that's a big reason to encourage people to get involved. And again, like I said, being on this nomination committee, I'm getting to see how many people we actually get to apply for things and how many people we get to vote for things. And like, it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you hear so many people complain or see them on social media complain. Right. And then when you ask for people to come and make a difference and try and change something, with the people that actually put up or shut up and get up and do it is very different.
Right. That's that's a great point. No, that's great insight. I like that. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to like talk about that in a way, because this is like the idea of the podcast for me. Like I said before we got on, I was like, I need to be like learning from people. So that's why I'm so excited, because I feel like today, like I was able to learn something, because it's so easy for us to like criticize, right? And like we do it all the time. And that's probably kind of leading into my next question, which may potentially be your answer too, which is like, you've obviously been in the field, and you've seen it. I feel like you've seen so many different forms of the field at different stages of those forms as well, right? Like it's been, I have X amount of years that you've been doing this, right? And you've had different experiences in different places. What are some of the flaws you see right now, right, in terms of maybe the way that we interact as coaches, maybe the way that we approach the industry itself, and some of the things that you think we might need to do, to really, as coaches and as administrators, or just people involved in the field of influencing athletes and influencing people, to really start to kind of move in the right direction, establish ourselves as a really, not to say they're respectable, that's not that we're not respected, but obviously, the idea is to continue to grow and to continue to establish. And so what would your thoughts be on that stuff and some of the things that we can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just over the negativity. So like, I think, the shitting on people or pointing out flaws in programs or snippets that you see on social media, right? Like, and I think about that sometimes when I post something, I'm like, oh God, what's someone going to think of that? And then I have to be like, look, that's that's 3 seconds of something that is planned out for a year, right? Like it may not be exactly what it's supposed to be like. And so I think just, people being more supportive. I mean, I think, I heard from people like Bob Alejo, who was key in getting the professional baseball strength coaches organized back when he was a strength coach in MLB, and they asked the guys to be more professional. Hey, don't wear sweatpants at the conference, be a more business casual, like, and to some degree, I joke around because I had someone who used to say, like, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And I like to wear gray sweatpants, right? So like I kind of want to wear that because that's the job I want. But like I understand, like, right, we need to break this mold of just these meatheads that are stuck in the basement, like some of us are right now, of a gym. And so that's, I think, key is what I've done a great job of getting out across campus. Like I know a lot of people in all different departments, from our Corps of Cadets to our Health and Human Performance, which they roped me into teaching a couple classes. So I teach one class each semester. So like it's been key in getting across campus and having people know that we're not like just the weights coach or whatever terminology they use, that it's not just some person that's in the basement and it's just like, I live super close. That was kind of a goal of mine when I took the job. I knew I wanted to be close the first couple of years because I wasn't going to have much of a social life, and I was just going to be at every athletic game I could possibly be at. So I honestly show up at almost every sport, at least for some sort of appearance. But that again has created buy-in from the athletes as well as the sport coaches, as well as all these other people that see me all the time when they're at events, like the president and stuff like that. So, I think that's been a key kind of selling point. But overall, like, people just need to stop being jerks to each other. Take it more serious. I don't know. I don't see a lot of doctors talking shit about each other on Twitter, right? So like, I don't know just because, some of us don't want to be taken more seriously. I guess that's okay too. But
for sure. No, I like that answer. I think it's interesting too, because it's like, in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, like we do need to have a little more positive. I feel like we need to, and that's kind of the point of this podcast, is like to really just like celebrate people a little bit more and be like, hey, like here's what this person thinks, and it's okay if you don't necessarily, if you want to do it a different way. Like, I've had like people like hit me up and been like, hey, like, how come you didn't like ask him this question or whatever? How come you didn't? And it's like, well, I mean, like, what do you like? You want me to try to like press the guy or whatever, just because he thinks, something different than what you think or whatever, or you want me to dig into something? It's like, I'm here, like, I like to have people on who like, I know, and, have disagreed with each other's methods in the past, but it's just like, just get people on. Like, people are going to do whatever they need to do and whatever they want to do. And at the end of the day, like you said, I think people need to stop being like so mean to each other, right? It's not that serious, right? Like, let's just kind of, act more professional about what we're doing and stuff like that. So, well, I do want to be conscious of your time, because I do appreciate you hopping on and all this stuff, but I do want to give you kind of like the final words. Like, if you have anything that you wanted to offer, like our audience range is pretty wide, like from like super young to a little bit older. So any sort of like words of wisdom or anything just from your experience that you want to provide to the listeners, some final words. It could be, whatever you'd like it to be. And then, and then, plug your Instagram or any social media or any other work that you want to obviously put out there for people to know now and to go check out. And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say words of wisdom wise, if you're up and coming or kind of even somewhere along in the game, one of my old mentors, and this from the bartending days, not strength and conditioning, said, we like problem solvers, not problem pointer outers. And that's probably been the biggest thing that stuck with me throughout my career and across everything I've done. And, obviously when you work with other people, and especially higher ups, typically they're going to expect you to come with solutions, not problems. So think about that before you start make your list of all the things you need. Think about what solutions you have to those, especially if you're in a smaller school or a smaller budget like we have here. It's more about the bigger picture and how we can solve this when I'm coming with a question. I'm on social media way too much. So at Coach Caulfield on Instagram is where I spend the majority of my time. We also have a strength page, Norwich SC. That's been getting some more hits too. So hope otherwise planning to be at the NSCA coaches conference in January. I'm doing a talk for Gatorade on the first day. We like to refer to it as the day one keynote. So
nice.
Mark that on your schedules. And I hope to do some events here up here at Norwich in beautiful central Vermont at some point. So stay tuned for that stuff. I do have a website I'm getting going. CoachCaulfield.com is up and running now. Nice. And I will get some more cooler stuff put on there. Right now it's kind of it's a visual like business card more than anything right now, but it'll hold all my events that we end up doing and anything else that we're able to offer. So check it out when you get a chance.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate you hopping on. This is awesome. This is a ton of insight. It's great education. I think it really starts to clarify things for a lot of people, a lot of young strength coaches and those who've been in the field for quite some time. So again, thank you, listeners. We'll catch you guys next time. And Scott, again, appreciate it. Stick around. I'm going to get some information from you so we can send you some gear. But thank you again for hopping on. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate your time too. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.